The dust devil that crossed Zelda Kincaid's path on that scorching August morning in 1872 should have been a warning, but she was too focused on the sound of distress coming from the canyon ahead to pay it any mind. She urged her mare forward, and that was when she heard it again, a horse screaming in a way that made her heart clench. Not just any scream, but words. Actual words that formed in her mind as clearly as if someone had spoken them aloud. The buckskin stallion trapped in the ravine was saying he was going to die, and he was asking for help. Zelda had lived 22 years without telling a soul about her gift, this strange ability that had been with her since childhood. Her parents had died when she was young, victims of cholera on the journey west, and she had been raised by her uncle in Sacramento. He was a practical man who would have thought she had lost her mind if she had ever confessed that horses spoke to her in ways no one else could hear. So she kept it hidden, this secret language that existed between her and the animals she loved most in the world. She dismounted quickly and approached the edge of the ravine, peering down at the trapped stallion. He was magnificent even in his terror, his buckskin coat dark with sweat, his black mane tangled with brush. He had fallen at least 15 feet and had wedged himself between two large boulders. One leg was caught at an awkward angle, and Zelda could see the whites of his eyes as he rolled them toward her. "I am here," she said aloud, though she knew the real communication happened somewhere deeper than words. "I will help you." The stallion's panic eased just a fraction, and she felt his response like a whisper against her thoughts. "Hurts, trapped, going to die here." "No," Zelda said firmly. "You are not going to die, but you need to trust me and stay calm." She studied the situation carefully. The ravine was too steep for her to climb down without equipment, and even if she could reach him, she would need help to free him from between those boulders. She hated to leave him, but there was no choice. She would have to ride back toward Hangtown and find assistance. "I have to go get help," she told the stallion. "I will come back, I promise you." The horse's fear spiked again, and she felt it like a physical thing. "Do not leave. We'll die alone." "I will not let you die," Zelda said, and she put every ounce of conviction she possessed into those words. "Stay calm. Save your strength. I will return." She rode hard toward Hangtown, pushing her mare faster than she liked, but time was critical. The town was barely more than a collection of rough buildings clustered along the road, a remnant of the gold rush days that had seen better years. Most of the miners had moved on, leaving behind a population of ranchers, drifters, and those too stubborn or too broke to go elsewhere. Zelda knew exactly one person in Hangtown, a woman named Martha who ran the boarding house where Zelda had been staying for the past 2 weeks. She had come to California from Sacramento with the intention of finding work as a seamstress, but the reality was that Hangtown did not need another seamstress. What it needed, apparently, was someone willing to mend harnesses and patch torn leather, which was how she had been spending her days. She tied her mare outside the saloon and burst through the doors, not caring that respectable women did not enter such establishments. A handful of men sat scattered at tables, and they all turned to stare at her. The bartender, a heavy-set man with suspicious eyes, frowned. "We do not serve ladies," he said. "I do not want a drink," Zelda said quickly. "I need help. There is a horse trapped in the ravine east of here, and I cannot free him alone." The men exchanged glances, and she saw the dismissal in their faces. One of them, an older man with a tobacco-stained beard, actually laughed. "A horse," he said. "You came running in here for a horse." "He will die if someone does not help him," Zelda said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Please, let him die," another man said with a shrug. "Probably a wild one anyway. Not worth the trouble." Zelda felt her hands curl into fists. She wanted to scream at them that the stallion was worth everything, that he was terrified and in pain and deserved better than to be abandoned. But before she could find the words, a voice spoke from the corner of the room. "I will help." She turned and saw him then, a man she had not noticed when she first entered. He was sitting alone at a table near the back wall, a hat pulled low over his face. Now he stood, unfolding to a height that was considerable even in a territory where most men were tall from hard living. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes that were a startling blue against sun-bronzed skin. "Benson Whitaker," he said, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture that might have been polite if his expression had not been so unreadable. "I have got rope and equipment in my saddle pack. Show me where this horse is." Relief flooded through Zelda so intensely that she felt momentarily dizzy. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you so much. We need to hurry." Benson Whitaker did not waste time with further conversation. He walked past her and out of the saloon, moving with the easy confidence of a man who was comfortable in his own skin. Zelda hurried after him, aware of the stares following them both. Outside, Benson moved to a tall black gelding tied to the hitching post. The horse was quality. Zelda could see that immediately. Well-muscled and alert, with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. Benson checked his saddle pack, confirming the presence of rope and other supplies, then mounted in one smooth motion. "Lead the way," he said. They rode in silence, pushing their horses as fast as the terrain would allow. Zelda kept glancing at Benson, trying to get a sense of the man who had agreed to help her when no one else would. He sat his horse like he had been born in the saddle, his posture relaxed, but his gaze constantly scanning their surroundings. There was something about him that suggested danger held at bay, a sense that he was a man who could handle himself in any situation. When they reached the ravine, Zelda dismounted and led Benson to the edge. He peered down at the trapped stallion, his expression thoughtful. "That is a bad situation," he said after a moment. "He is wedged in there tight. We are going to have to get down there and shift those boulders enough to free his leg, then figure out how to get him back up this slope." "Can we do it?" Zelda asked. Benson looked at her, and for the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. "You are asking the wrong question. The question is whether that horse will let us do it. He is terrified, and a terrified horse can hurt himself and us trying to fight free." "He will let us help him," Zelda said with certainty. Benson raised an eyebrow but did not argue. Instead, he began unpacking his supplies, laying out rope and a leather harness that looked sturdy enough to bear significant weight. Zelda watched him work, impressed by his efficiency. "I am going to lower myself down first," Benson said. "I need to assess the situation up close. You stay up here and manage the rope." "I should come with you," Zelda protested. "I can help." "Not yet," Benson said firmly. "That stallion does not know me and he is already scared. Adding two strangers at once will make things worse." Zelda wanted to argue, but she understood his point. She took hold of the rope as Benson secured it around a sturdy pine tree, then watched as he backed over the edge of the ravine. He descended carefully, using his feet to brace against the rocky wall. When he reached the bottom, he moved slowly toward the trapped stallion. "Easy now," Zelda heard him say, his voice calm and low. "Nobody is going to hurt you." The stallion rolled his eyes and tried to lunge away, but his trapped leg held him fast. Zelda felt his panic like a wave crashing over her. "Benson, stop," she called down. "Let me talk to him first." Benson looked up at her with clear skepticism, but he took a step back. Zelda leaned over the edge of the ravine and focused all her attention on the stallion. "Listen to me," she said, speaking aloud but also sending her thoughts toward him in that way she had learned to do. "This man is here to help. He is going to free your leg, but you have to stay still. You have to trust us. If you fight, you will hurt yourself worse." She felt the stallion's consciousness brush against hers, confused and frightened but also desperate. "Hurts," he said again, the word forming in her mind. "Scared." "I know," Zelda said gently. "I know you are scared. But I promised I would save you, and I keep my promises. This man is strong. He can move the rocks, but you have to be still." There was a long moment where she felt the stallion hovering between terror and trust. Then, slowly, he lowered his head and released a long breath. The wild edge of his panic receded, replaced by a wary acceptance. "He will let you approach now," Zelda called down to Benson. Benson gave her a look that was equal parts confusion and disbelief, but he moved toward the stallion again. This time, the horse did not try to lunge away. He stood trembling but still as Benson examined his trapped leg. "The leg is not broken," Benson called up. "That is good, but I need to shift this boulder about 6 inches to the left to free him. I am going to need help with that." "I am coming down," Zelda said, already reaching for the rope. "You know how to rappel?" Benson asked, sounding doubtful. "I can learn quickly," Zelda said, which was not exactly an answer but was the best she could offer. The descent was more difficult than it looked, and she scraped her hands raw on the rope before her feet finally touched the bottom of the ravine. Benson steadied her with a hand on her elbow, and she was suddenly very aware of how close they were standing. He smelled like leather and sage and something else she could not quite name. "Thank you," she said, pulling away. Benson studied her for a moment, his blue eyes unreadable. "You are either very brave or very foolish, coming down here for a wild horse." "He is not just any horse," Zelda said. "And it is not foolish to help something that needs you." Something shifted in Benson's expression, though she could not quite interpret it. He turned his attention back to the stallion. "We need to move this boulder," he said, pointing. "On the count of 3, push with everything you have got." They positioned themselves on either side of the boulder, bracing their feet against the rocky ground. Zelda could feel the stallion watching them, his fear a living thing in the air. "It will be over soon," she told him silently. "Just a little longer." 1, Benson counted. 2, 3. They pushed, and for a horrible moment, nothing happened. The boulder sat immovable, mocking their efforts. Then, slowly, it began to shift. Zelda pushed harder, feeling her muscles scream in protest, and suddenly the boulder rolled 6 inches to the left. The stallion immediately tried to pull his leg free, and Zelda felt his surge of hope. But the leg was still pinned by a smaller rock beneath the boulder. "Wait," Benson said, moving quickly to crouch beside the trapped leg. He worked the smaller rock free with his hands, and then the stallion was pulling his leg out, scrambling backward until he stood free of the boulders. He was shaking all over, and Zelda could see the abrasions on his trapped leg, but he was standing. That was what mattered. "Good," she said, moving slowly toward him. "You did so well. Now we need to get you out of this ravine." The stallion's ears swiveled toward her, and she felt his exhaustion washing over her in waves. He hurt, and he was tired, and he did not understand how he was going to get back up the slope. "We are going to help you," Zelda said. She turned to Benson. "Can we use the rope to guide him up?" Benson was staring at her with an expression she could not quite read. "What are you doing?" he asked. "What do you mean, the way you are talking to him, the way he is responding to you?" Benson shook his head slowly. "I have never seen that before. I have worked with horses my whole life, and I have never seen one react the way this stallion is reacting to you." Zelda felt her stomach drop. She had been so focused on helping the stallion that she had forgotten to guard her secret. "I do not know what you mean," she said, but the words sounded weak even to her own ears. Benson continued to watch her, and she could see him working through what he had witnessed. "You are talking to him," he said slowly. "Really talking to him, and he is listening." There seemed little point in denying it now. Zelda lifted her chin and met Benson's gaze directly. "Yes," she said. "I can communicate with horses. I always have been able to. I know it sounds insane, but it is the truth." She braced herself for mockery or dismissal, but Benson simply nodded slowly. "Well," he said, "that explains a lot. Ask him if he can make it up the slope if we guide him with the rope." Zelda blinked, surprised by his matter-of-fact acceptance. She turned her attention back to the stallion, sending her question to him in that wordless way. She felt his uncertainty, but also his determination. He wanted out of this ravine. "He says he can try," Zelda said. "Then let us do it," Benson said. It took the better part of an hour to get the stallion up the slope. Benson rigged a harness around the horse's chest and attached it to the rope, which they secured to the pine tree above. Zelda climbed back up first, then she and Benson worked together to guide the stallion as he scrambled up the rocky incline. It was exhausting, nerve-wracking work, and there were moments when Zelda thought they were going to fail. But the stallion kept fighting, and finally, his hooves found purchase on solid ground at the top of the ravine. He stood there trembling, his coat dark with sweat, his injured leg held slightly off the ground. Zelda approached him slowly, and he lowered his head to press his forehead against her chest. She felt his gratitude like a warm wave, and she wrapped her arms around his neck. "You are safe now," she whispered. "You are safe." Benson watched them from a few feet away, his expression thoughtful. When Zelda finally stepped back from the stallion, Benson said, "He needs water and rest. My ranch is about 3 miles north of here. He can recover there." "Your ranch?" Zelda asked. "It is not much," Benson admitted. "Just a small operation, but I have got a barn and a corral and a water trough." "More than he has got out here." Zelda looked at the stallion, considering. He was free, but he was injured and exhausted. Trying to survive on his own in this condition would be difficult. "Would he be safe there?" she asked. "I mean, you would not try to break him or sell him." Benson's expression hardened slightly. "I do not break horses," he said. "I train them if they are willing to be trained. This one clearly belongs to the wild. Once he is healed, he can go back to it." Zelda studied Benson's face and found that she believed him. There was something solid about him, something trustworthy beneath the rough exterior. "All right," she said. "We will bring him to your ranch." Leading the injured stallion was slow work, but the horse followed Zelda with surprising docility. She walked beside him, keeping up a steady stream of silent reassurance, while Benson rode ahead on his gelding. The land here was beautiful in a harsh way, all golden grass and scattered oaks with the Sierra Nevada mountains rising in the distance. The summer heat was oppressive, and Zelda could feel sweat running down her back beneath her dress. When they finally reached Benson's ranch, Zelda felt relief wash over her. The property was modest but well-maintained, with a small house, a barn, and several corrals. She could see cattle grazing in a far pasture, and a few chickens scratched in the dirt near the house. Benson dismounted and opened the gate to one of the corrals. "Bring him in here," he said. "There is water, and I will get him some hay." The stallion hesitated at the gate, clearly nervous about being enclosed, but Zelda sent him waves of reassurance. "Just for a little while," she told him, "until you heal. Then you can go back to the mountains." The stallion entered the corral and immediately went to the water trough, drinking deeply. Zelda stayed by the fence, watching him, while Benson disappeared into the barn and returned with an armful of hay. "I have got some salve in the house," Benson said, "for his leg. If you can get him to hold still, I will apply it." "I can do that," Zelda said. She entered the corral and approached the stallion, who was now eating hay with single-minded focus. When she reached him, she placed her hand on his shoulder and sent him a question. "Will you let the man tend your leg? He has medicine that will help the healing." The stallion paused in his eating and swung his head toward her. She felt his wariness but also his growing trust in her. "Will not hurt?" he asked. "It might sting a little," Zelda said honestly. "But it will make you better faster." The stallion considered this, then lowered his head back to the hay in what she took as acceptance. Benson entered the corral carrying a tin of salve, and Zelda positioned herself at the stallion's head, keeping one hand on his neck. "Tell him I am going to touch the leg now," Benson said quietly. Zelda did, and the stallion tensed but did not pull away. Benson worked quickly and efficiently, cleaning the abrasions and applying the salve with gentle hands. When he finished, he stepped back and nodded to Zelda. "Done," he said. "He should heal up just fine if he stays off that leg for a few days." They left the stallion to his hay and walked back toward the house. The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Zelda realized with surprise that the entire day had passed in the effort to save one horse. "I should get back to town," she said. "Martha will be wondering where I am." "It is a 3-mile ride and it will be dark soon," Benson pointed out. "You are welcome to stay here tonight." "I have got a spare room." Zelda hesitated. She barely knew this man, and staying overnight at his ranch would be improper by any standard. But the alternative was riding back to Hangtown in the dark, and she was exhausted. "I do not want to impose," she said. "It is not an imposition," Benson said. "Besides, you will want to check on your stallion in the morning, will you not?" He had her there. Zelda did want to check on the stallion. She wanted to make sure he was healing properly and that he was not too distressed by confinement. "All right," she said. "Thank you for your hospitality." Benson's house was small but surprisingly neat. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace taking up most of one wall. A rough-hewn table and chairs sat near the window, and a faded rug covered part of the wooden floor. Through an open doorway, Zelda could see a narrow hallway that presumably led to the bedrooms. "I will make some supper," Benson said, moving toward the stove. "Nothing fancy, but it will fill your stomach." "Can I help?" Zelda asked. "You can sit down and rest," Benson said. "You have had a long day." Zelda sat at the table and watched as Benson worked. He moved around the kitchen with the same efficiency he had shown everything else, and soon the smell of frying bacon and beans filled the air. Despite everything, Zelda found herself smiling. There was something surreal about sitting in a strange man's kitchen after the day she had had. "So," Benson said as he set plates of food on the table, "are you going to tell me how you do it?" "Do what?" Zelda asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "Talk to horses." Benson sat down across from her and met her eyes. "I meant what I said. I have never seen anything like it." Zelda picked up her fork and pushed beans around her plate, trying to decide how much to tell him. "I have been able to do it for as long as I can remember," she finally said. "It is not like talking to people. I do not hear words exactly. It is more like feelings and impressions that form into meaning, and it only works with horses. I tried with other animals when I was a child, but horses are the only ones who respond." "Can all horses hear you?" Benson asked. "Or only some?" "All of them, as far as I can tell," Zelda said. "Though some are more willing to communicate than others. It depends on their personality and how much they trust humans." Benson leaned back in his chair, studying her with those unsettling blue eyes. "That is quite a gift, or quite a curse," Zelda said. "I have never told anyone about it before today. People would think I was insane." "Maybe," Benson allowed. "Or maybe they would try to exploit you, use your ability for their own gain." Zelda had never thought of it quite that way, but she supposed he was right. There were plenty of people who would see her gift as something to be used rather than respected. "Why did you help me today?" she asked, changing the subject. Those other men in the saloon wanted nothing to do with saving the stallion, but you agreed immediately. Benson was quiet for a moment, and Zelda thought he might not answer. Then he said, "I grew up on a ranch in Texas. My father raised horses, and he taught me to respect them, to see them as partners rather than tools. When you came into that saloon asking for help with a trapped horse, I saw someone who felt the same way. That is rare enough that it seemed worth my time." "What brought you to California?" Zelda asked. "Same thing that brings most people," Benson said with a shrug. "I was looking for a fresh start. Texas had too many memories and none of them were good. I saved up enough money to buy this place, and I have been here about 2 years now." There was a story in those words, Zelda could tell, pain and loss and things he did not want to talk about. She understood that. Everyone who came west seemed to be running from something or towards something, and usually it was both. They finished their meal in companionable silence, and then Benson showed Zelda to the spare room. It was small and sparsely furnished, with just a narrow bed and a chest of drawers, but it was clean and the bed looked comfortable. "There is water in the pitcher if you need to wash," Benson said from the doorway, "and holler if you need anything else." "Thank you," Zelda said, "for everything." "I could not have saved him without you." Benson tipped his hat. "I think you would have found a way. You are not the type to give up easily." After he left, Zelda sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel the full weight of the day's exhaustion. Her hands were scraped and sore from the rope, her muscles ached, and she was fairly certain she would have bruises tomorrow. But they had saved the stallion, and that made everything worth it. She lay down on the bed without bothering to undress beyond removing her boots, and sleep claimed her almost immediately. She woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and pale dawn light filtering through the window. For a moment, she was disoriented, unable to remember where she was. Then it all came back to her, and she sat up quickly. The stallion. She needed to check on the stallion. She pulled on her boots and stepped out of the room, finding the house quiet and empty. Through the window, she could see Benson outside, already at work feeding his cattle. Zelda slipped out the front door and made her way to the corral. The stallion was lying down, which sent a spike of alarm through her until she realized he was simply resting. When he sensed her approach, he raised his head and climbed to his feet, moving carefully but without obvious pain. "Good morning," Zelda said, both aloud and silently. "How are you feeling?" The stallion walked to the fence, and she felt his response. The pain in his leg had dulled to a manageable ache, and he was hungry and restless, but overall much better than yesterday. "That is good," Zelda said, reaching through the fence to stroke his face. "You are a strong one. He is looking better." Zelda turned to find Benson walking toward her, carrying a bucket that presumably contained feed for the stallion. "His leg is much improved," Zelda said. "He will probably be ready to return to the wild in a few days." Benson set the bucket down inside the corral, and the stallion immediately moved to investigate it. "Seems a shame to let a horse like that go," Benson said thoughtfully. "He has got good lines, strong build. He would make an excellent foundation for a breeding program." "He is wild," Zelda said firmly. "He belongs in the mountains, not locked in a corral." Benson held up his hands. "I was just making an observation. I already told you I would not try to keep him against his will." He paused, then added, "Though I notice you said his will, not yours." Zelda felt herself flush. "It is his choice to make." "Is it?" Benson asked. "Or are you making it for him based on what you think he should want?" The question struck Zelda harder than she would have liked to admit. Was she projecting her own desires onto the stallion? She had always believed that horses valued freedom above all else, but what if she was wrong? "I will ask him," she said quietly. "When he is healed, I will ask him what he wants." Benson nodded, apparently satisfied with that answer. "Come on." I have got coffee brewing, and you should eat something before you ride back to town." Over breakfast, Benson asked Zelda about her life in Sacramento and her plans for the future. She told him about her uncle's ranch, about learning to sew and repair leather goods, about the restless feeling that had driven her to leave the only home she knew and try her luck in Hangtown. "There is not much opportunity for a woman alone," she admitted. "Most people think I should find a husband and settle down, but I have never met a man who understood me, who saw me as anything more than a potential wife and mother." "And that is not enough for you?" Benson asked. "I want more," Zelda said. "I want to work with horses. Really work with them, not just ride them for pleasure. I want to use my gift for something meaningful. But I do not know how to do that in a way that would not expose me as either insane or as something to be exploited." Benson was quiet for a long moment, his coffee cup cradled in his hands. Then he said, "What if you stayed here?" Zelda looked up sharply. "What? What if you stayed here and worked with me?" Benson said. "I need help with the ranch. The cattle are fine, but I have been thinking about expanding into horses. With your ability, we could train horses better than anyone else in California. We could build a reputation, make real money." "I barely know you," Zelda protested. "That is fair," Benson said. "But you know I respect horses the way you do. And you know I did not think you were crazy when you told me about your gift. That has to count for something." It did count for something. It counted for a lot, actually. Zelda had spent her entire life hiding who she was and what she could do, and here was a man who had seen the truth and accepted it without question. More than that, he saw value in it. He saw possibility. "I would need my own space," Zelda said slowly. "I could not stay in your house indefinitely. It would not be proper." "There is a line shack about a quarter-mile from here," Benson said. "It is not fancy, but it has got 4 walls and a roof. I could fix it up, make it livable for you." "And we would be business partners?" Zelda asked. "Equal partners?" Benson extended his hand across the table. "Equal partners," he agreed. "We split all profits 50-50, and we both have a say in how the operation is run." Zelda looked at his outstretched hand, and something fluttered in her chest. This was insane. She had known this man for less than 24 hours, and she was seriously considering upending her entire life to go into business with him. But when would she get another opportunity like this? When would she find another person who not only accepted her gift but wanted to help her use it? She reached out and clasped his hand. "Partners," she said. Benson's hand was warm and calloused, and his grip was firm without being crushing. When he smiled, it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less guarded. "Partners," he echoed. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Benson made good on his promise to fix up the line shack, and Zelda moved her few possessions from the boarding house in Hangtown. The shack was small and rustic, but it had a sturdy door and a wood stove and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It was more than enough. During the day, Zelda and Benson worked together on the ranch. She helped with the cattle when needed, but most of her time was spent with the horses. In addition to Benson's gelding and her own mare, they now had the buckskin stallion, who was healing rapidly. Zelda checked on him every morning and evening, monitoring his progress and continuing to build trust between them. "You have not asked him yet," Benson observed one evening as they watched the stallion from outside the corral. "About whether he wants to stay or go." "I know," Zelda admitted. "Part of me is afraid of the answer. Afraid he will want to leave. Afraid I have already influenced his decision without meaning to," Zelda said. "Every time I visit him, every time I bring him food and tend his wounds, I am creating an association between humans and care. What if he only wants to stay because I have manipulated him into it?" Benson leaned his elbows on the top rail of the fence. Is not that what all horse training is, though? Creating associations, rewarding desired behavior and discouraging unwanted behavior. That is different, Zelda said. That is teaching. This feels like something else. Ask him, Benson said. You will not know unless you ask. So that night, after Benson had gone back to the house, Zelda entered the corral and approached the stallion. His leg was almost fully healed and he moved without any sign of pain. He could leave tomorrow if he wanted to. Nothing was stopping him. Zelda took a deep breath and sent her question to him, making it as clear and unbiased as she could. You are healed now. You can return to the mountains, back to the wild. Is that what you want, or do you want to stay here with us? She felt the stallion's consciousness brush against hers, considering. Images and impressions flooded through her, things she did not have words for. She saw the mountains through his eyes, the freedom of running with the wind in his mane. But she also felt his loneliness, the constant struggle for survival, the fear of predators and harsh winters. And she felt something else, something new. A curiosity about these humans who had saved him. A wondering about what life might be like here, with regular food and shelter and the strange woman who spoke his language. Stay, the stallion finally said, the word forming with surprising clarity in Zelda's mind. Want to stay, for now, for now. That was honest, at least. The stallion was not promising forever, but he was willing to try this life and see if it suited him. Then you are welcome here, Zelda told him, for as long as you want. She told Benson the next morning over breakfast, and she saw the satisfaction in his eyes. Now we can start building our reputation, he said, but we need to be smart about it. We cannot advertise your gift, or people will either think we are charlatans or they will try to steal you away. So what do? Zelda asked. We train horses, Benson said simply. We take on difficult cases, horses that other trainers have given up on, and we turn them into willing partners for their owners. People will talk about our results and word will spread. Eventually, we will have more work than we can handle. It sounded good in theory, but Zelda worried about the execution. What if I cannot reach some horses? What if they do not want to communicate with me? Then we train them the conventional way, Benson said, but I suspect most horses will respond to you. The question is whether their owners will let us use our methods. Their first client came to them by accident rather than design. A rancher from a neighboring property stopped by one afternoon to ask Benson about buying cattle feed, and he happened to mention that he was about to put down a 3-year-old gelding who had proven impossible to break. He is mean, the rancher said, shaking his head. Bit 2 handlers and kicked another so hard the man could not walk for a week. I cannot have an animal like that around, too dangerous. What if we could gentle him? Benson asked. My partner and I specialize in difficult horses. The rancher looked skeptical. Your partner? He glanced around, clearly expecting to see another man. Miss Kincaid, Benson said, gesturing to where Zelda stood near the barn. She has a way with horses that I have never seen matched. The rancher's skepticism deepened. A woman. You are telling me a woman can handle a horse that 3 grown men could not? Bring the horse here, Benson said calmly. Give us 1 week. If we cannot gentle him, you can put him down as planned. But if we succeed, you pay us $50. $50 was a substantial sum, and the rancher knew it. But he also knew that a good gelding was worth more than $50 if it could be ridden. 1 week, he said. But if either of you gets hurt, that is on you. I warned you the horse is dangerous. The gelding arrived the next day, and Zelda saw immediately why the rancher considered him untrainable. The horse was terrified, his eyes rolling and his body tensed for flight or fight. But beneath the terror, Zelda sensed something else. Pain. He is hurt, she told Benson quietly. Something is causing him physical pain, and it is making him act out. Can you pinpoint where? Benson asked. Zelda approached the corral slowly, projecting calm with every step. The gelding backed away, but she kept coming, not threatening, just persistent. When she finally got close enough, she sent her question to him. Where does it hurt? The response was immediate and clear. His back. Something on his back was causing constant, agonizing pain. Zelda circled around until she was positioned to see the gelding's back, and that was when she saw it. An old saddle sore that had never healed properly, now infected and swollen beneath the coat. There, she said, pointing. That infected sore. It has probably been bothering him for months, and every time someone tried to saddle him, it caused intense pain. No wonder he fought back. Benson examined the sore carefully. This is bad, he said. It needs to be cleaned and treated, but touching it is going to hurt like hell, and I do not want to get kicked for my trouble. I can keep him calm, Zelda said. Let me try. She spent the next hour standing beside the gelding, one hand on his neck, sending him waves of reassurance and calm. She showed him what they needed to do, made him understand that the pain of treatment would lead to the relief of healing. The gelding was not happy about it, but he trusted her enough to stand still while Benson cleaned and dressed the wound. By the end of the week, the infection had cleared and the gelding's entire demeanor had changed. He was still nervous around most people, but he followed Zelda around the corral like a puppy, and he let Benson saddle him without protest. When the rancher came to collect his horse, he stared in disbelief. That cannot be the same animal. It is, Benson said. He had an infected saddle sore that was causing him constant pain. Once we treated that, he became tractable. The rancher paid them the $50 without complaint and told them he would recommend their services to everyone he knew. Word spread faster than Zelda had expected, and within a month, they had 3 more horses to train. Within 2 months, they had a waiting list. The work was hard but deeply satisfying. Every horse that came to them had a story, a reason for its behavior, and Zelda felt like she was finally using her gift for something meaningful. She and Benson fell into an easy partnership, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses, developing a wordless communication of their own that made their work more efficient. But something else was growing between them too, something neither of them seemed willing to acknowledge. Zelda found herself looking forward to their mornings together, to the sound of Benson's voice and the rare smiles he gave when a training session went well. She noticed the way his hands moved when he worked, gentle and sure. She noticed the blue of his eyes against his tanned skin, and the way his hair fell across his forehead when he forgot to push it back. And sometimes, she caught him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. It made her heart beat faster and her breath catch in her throat. One evening in late October, as they were finishing up the day's work, Benson said, "There is a harvest dance in town next Saturday. I thought maybe you might want to go." Zelda looked up in surprise. "Are you asking me to the dance?" "I am asking if you want to go," Benson said carefully. It does not have to be anything more than 2 friends attending a town gathering. But it felt like more. It felt like a line being carefully approached, and Zelda did not know if she was ready to cross it. What if going to the dance together changed things between them? What if it complicated their partnership? "I do not know," she said honestly. "I do not want to risk what we have here." Benson nodded slowly. "I understand. Forget I mentioned it." But Zelda could not forget it. She lay awake that night in the line shack, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Benson. Thinking about the way he looked at her sometimes, like she was something precious. Thinking about how safe she felt around him, how understood. She had told him her deepest secret, and he had not only believed her but had built a life with her around it. Was that not worth exploring? Was the possibility of something more not worth the risk? The next morning, she found Benson in the barn grooming his gelding. "I changed my mind," she said without preamble, "about the dance. I would like to go with you." Benson paused in his grooming, and when he turned to face her, there was something warm and hopeful in his eyes. "Yeah, yeah," Zelda said, and she smiled. The harvest dance was held in the largest barn in Hangtown, with lanterns strung from the rafters and a small group of musicians playing fiddle and guitar in the corner. It seemed like half the county had turned out, and the air was filled with laughter and conversation and the sound of dancing feet. Zelda had borrowed a dress from Martha at the boarding house, a deep blue calico that brought out the green in her eyes. She felt self-conscious and exposed in a way she never felt in her work clothes, but when Benson saw her, his expression made the discomfort worth it. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Zelda said, taking in his freshly pressed shirt and neatly combed hair. They danced, and Benson was surprisingly good at it despite claiming to be out of practice. He held her carefully, respectfully, but there was something in the way he looked at her that made Zelda's pulse race. When the music slowed and he pulled her closer, she let herself lean into him, breathing in the scent of soap and leather that she had come to associate with safety and home. "Zelda," he said softly, and the way he said her name made something inside her chest crack open. "Yes. I know we agreed to be partners, just partners, but I think you should know that I have feelings for you, real feelings. And if you do not feel the same way, I will never mention it again. We can keep things exactly as they are, but I needed to tell you the truth." Zelda pulled back just enough to look up into his face. His blue eyes were serious and a little afraid, and she realized that he was risking everything by being honest with her. Their partnership, their friendship, the life they had built together. He was putting it all on the line because he valued truth more than comfort. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I have for a while now. I was just too afraid to say anything." The relief that washed over Benson's face was beautiful to witness. He pulled her close again, and this time when they danced, there was no careful distance between them. They moved together like they worked together, in perfect synchronization. When they left the dance that night and rode back to the ranch under a sky full of stars, Benson reached over and took Zelda's hand. She laced her fingers through his and held on tight, feeling like she was flying and falling at the same time. At the ranch, Benson walked her to the line shack, and they stood outside the door for a long moment, neither wanting to say good night. "I do not know what happens next," Zelda admitted. "I have never felt this way about anyone before." "We take it slow," Benson said. "We figure it out together. We do not have to rush anything." "Okay," Zelda said. Then, gathering her courage, she leaned up and kissed him. It was soft and brief, just a gentle press of lips, but it felt like a promise. When she pulled back, Benson was smiling in a way she had never seen before, open and joyful and utterly unguarded. "Good night, Zelda," he said. "Good night, Benson," she replied. Over the following months, their relationship deepened and grew. They continued to work together during the day, training horses and building their reputation. But now, they also spent their evenings together, talking by the fire in Benson's house or walking through the fields as the sun set. Benson told her about his childhood in Texas, about the father who had taught him everything he knew about horses, and the mother who had died when he was young. He told her about the war, about fighting for the Confederacy, and the things he had seen and done that still haunted him. Zelda told him about the loneliness of growing up different, about the isolation of having a gift she could never share. She told him about her dreams of doing something meaningful with her life, of being more than what society expected a woman to be. "You are already more," Benson told her one night as they sat together on his porch. "You are the most remarkable person I have ever met." In the spring of 1873, Benson asked Zelda to marry him. They were in the corral with the buckskin stallion, who was now fully integrated into ranch life. The stallion had proven to be everything Benson had predicted: strong and intelligent and willing. He was the foundation of their breeding program, and several of the local ranchers had already paid to have their mares bred to him. "I know we have not been together long," Benson said, turning to face Zelda. "But I cannot imagine my life without you in it. I love you, Zelda Kincaid. I love your strength and your compassion and the way you see the world. Will you marry me?" Zelda felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in June in a simple ceremony at the church in Hangtown. Martha stood up as Zelda's witness, and a neighboring rancher named Thomas served as Benson's. It was not a large wedding, but it was perfect. Zelda wore a cream-colored dress she had sewn herself, and Benson wore his best suit. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, Zelda felt like her heart might burst from happiness. After the wedding, Zelda moved out of the line shack and into the main house with Benson. He had added a room onto the house, expanding it to give them more space, and Zelda delighted in making it into a real home. She hung curtains in the windows and planted a vegetable garden behind the house. She cooked meals and mended clothes, and did all the domestic tasks she had once thought would trap her, and found that they did not feel like a trap when they were part of building a life with someone she loved. But she also continued to work with the horses, and Benson never suggested that marriage should change that. They were still partners in every sense of the word, and their reputation continued to grow. People came from all over Northern California to have them train their horses, and they charged premium prices because their results were consistently outstanding. In the autumn of 1873, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. She had never given much thought to motherhood, and now it was happening whether she was ready or not. "We are having a baby," she told Benson that night over dinner, her voice shaking slightly. Benson's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, fear, joy, and finally settled on something that looked like wonder. "A baby," he repeated. "We are having a baby." "Are you happy about it?" Zelda asked. "Happy." Benson came around the table and pulled her into his arms. "Zelda, I am terrified and thrilled and so in love with you I can barely think straight. Of course I am happy." The pregnancy was difficult. Zelda struggled with nausea and exhaustion, and she hated feeling weak and useless. But Benson was patient and supportive, taking on more of the work and never complaining about the extra burden. In May of 1874, Zelda gave birth to a son. The labor was long and painful, attended by a midwife from Hangtown, but when the baby was finally placed in her arms, every moment of suffering felt worth it. He was tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and his father's blue eyes. "What should we name him?" Benson asked, staring down at his son with an expression of absolute awe. "James," Zelda said. "James Whitaker, after your father." Benson's eyes filled with tears. "James," he said softly. "That is perfect." Being a mother was harder than Zelda had expected. The baby demanded constant attention, and she was exhausted all the time. But there were moments of pure magic, too. Moments when James smiled up at her or fell asleep on her chest, and she felt a love so fierce it was almost frightening. Benson was a devoted father, changing diapers and walking the floor with James when he was fussy at night. He sang to his son in a low, rumbling voice, silly songs that made Zelda laugh. And as James grew, Benson took him everywhere, carrying him in a sling against his chest while he worked. The buckskin stallion was fascinated by the baby. He would come to the fence whenever Zelda brought James outside, and he would lower his head to sniff the tiny human with careful curiosity. "Baby," Zelda told the stallion, "this is our son." She felt the stallion's response, a kind of protective warmth that surprised her. The wild horse who had once been trapped in a ravine had become part of their family, and he seemed to recognize James as someone to be protected. As James grew into a toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. Benson and Zelda expanded their operation, buying more land and bringing in additional horses. They hired a young man named Peter to help with the cattle and the daily ranch work, which freed up more of their time for training. Zelda discovered that she could balance being a mother and a horse trainer more easily than she had feared. James spent much of his time with her in the corrals, watching as she worked with the horses. He seemed to have inherited some of her gift, because the horses were always gentle around him, even the difficult ones. One afternoon when James was 3 years old, Zelda was working with a particularly stubborn mare when James toddled over to the fence. "Mama," he called, "the horse is sad." Zelda paused and looked at her son. "What do you mean? She misses her baby," James said with the certainty of a child. "She had a baby and it got taken away." Zelda reached out with her gift and touched the mare's consciousness. James was right. The mare had been separated from her foal and the grief of it was affecting her behavior. "How did you know that?" Zelda asked her son. James shrugged. "She told me." Zelda looked at Benson, who had been watching the exchange with interest. "I think our son has the gift too," she said quietly. Benson smiled. "Well, that is going to make things interesting." They tracked down the mare's foal, which had been sold to another rancher, and negotiated to bring the young horse to their ranch. When mother and foal were reunited, the mare's entire demeanor changed. She became willing and cooperative, and within 2 weeks, Zelda had her fully trained. As James grew older, Zelda began to teach him about his gift. She explained how to listen to the horses, how to project calm, how to understand the images and feelings they communicated. James took to it naturally, and by the time he was 5, he was helping his parents with the training in small but meaningful ways. In the summer of 1878, Zelda became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and in March of 1879, she gave birth to a daughter. They named her Sarah, after Zelda's mother, and from the moment she arrived, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Sarah was different from James. Where he had been quiet and serious as a baby, she was cheerful and outgoing. She laughed easily and charmed everyone she met. And as she grew, it became clear that she had also inherited the gift of speaking with horses. "We are raising a dynasty of horse whisperers," Benson joked one evening as they watched their children playing in the yard. "Is that what we are?" Zelda asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "Horse whisperers? I do not know what else to call it," Benson said. "But whatever it is ours. This life we built together, this family, this ranch. It is everything I never knew I needed." Zelda turned to look at him, this man who had agreed to help her save a trapped stallion all those years ago. His hair was starting to show threads of gray now, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen, and she loved him more than she had thought possible to love another person. "I love you, Benson Whitaker," she said. "I love you too," he replied, and he kissed her as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. James grew into a thoughtful young man who could gentle the wildest horse with patience and understanding. Sarah became a whirlwind of energy and laughter, fearless in her interactions with even the most difficult animals. The ranch grew and prospered, becoming known throughout California as the best place to train a horse. In 1885, when James was 11 and Sarah was 6, they added a third child to the family, another son whom they named Daniel. Unlike his siblings, Daniel did not seem to have inherited the gift of speaking with horses. But he had other talents, a head for numbers and business that would prove invaluable as the ranch continued to expand. The buckskin stallion grew old gracefully, and when he finally passed away in 1887, the entire family mourned him. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, and Zelda planted wildflowers on his grave. He had been the beginning of everything, the reason she and Benson had met, and she would never forget him. But his legacy lived on in his offspring. The ranch now had a herd of horses that all traced their lineage back to that wild stallion, and they were prized throughout the West for their intelligence and spirit. As Zelda and Benson grew older, they began to step back from the daily operations of the ranch, turning more and more responsibility over to their children. James became the primary trainer, with Sarah working alongside him. Daniel handled the business side of things, negotiating prices and managing accounts with a skill that impressed even the most hardened ranchers. On a warm evening in June of 1895, Zelda and Benson sat together on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the land they had built their life on. They were both in their mid-40s now, no longer young but not yet old. Their children were grown, James married with a baby of his own, Sarah courting a young rancher from a neighboring property, and Daniel away at school learning business management. "You ever regret it?" Zelda asked. "Taking a chance on a strange woman who talked to horses?" Benson took her hand and brought it to his lips. "Not for a single second. That was the best decision I ever made." "I never thought I could be this happy," Zelda said. "When I was young, I thought my gift made me strange and alone. I thought I would have to hide who I was forever. But then I found you and you saw me, really saw me. And you did not just accept me, you celebrated me." "You saved me too," Benson said quietly. "I was running from my past when I came to California. I was lost and angry, and I did not think I deserved happiness. But you showed me that I could build something good, that I could be better than I was." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands and watching the shadows lengthen across the fields. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of horses moving in the corrals, the familiar sounds that had been the soundtrack of their life together. "When I look back on everything," Zelda said, "I keep coming back to that day in the ravine. If I had not heard that stallion crying out, if you had not been in that saloon, if we had not worked together to save him, none of this would exist. Our entire life came down to one moment of choosing to help a trapped horse." "Maybe that is how all good things start," Benson said. "With one person choosing to do the right thing, and another person choosing to help." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Zelda leaned her head on her husband's shoulder and thought about the journey that had brought them here. From Sacramento to Hangtown, from solitude to partnership, from friendship to love. Every step of the way, horses had been the thread connecting it all, the language she and Benson shared even before they knew each other. She thought about the buckskin stallion, that wild creature who had trusted her enough to let humans save him. He had chosen to stay when he could have left, and in doing so, he had changed the course of her life. His descendants still ran in the fields of their ranch, carrying his legacy forward. And she thought about the gift that had once felt like a curse, the strange ability that had set her apart from everyone else. It had taken meeting Benson to realize that being different was not something to hide but something to embrace. Her gift had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams, a partnership based on mutual respect and understanding, a family that carried her abilities into the next generation. "I never said thank you," Zelda said suddenly. "For what?" Benson asked. "For saying you would help that day. For believing me about my gift. For building this life with me. For loving me exactly as I am." Benson pulled her closer and kissed the top of her head. "You do not need to thank me for any of that. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done." They stayed on the porch until the moon rose, full and bright, casting silver light across the ranch. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied, and Zelda felt a brush of consciousness against her mind. One of the young mares, content and secure in her corral, simply saying good night. Zelda sent back a feeling of peace and warmth, and the mare settled. Even after all these years, the gift still filled her with wonder. The ability to touch another consciousness, to bridge the gap between species, to understand and be understood. "Come on," Benson said, standing and offering her his hand. "Let us go inside." Zelda took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Together they walked into the house, into the life they had built together, surrounded by the evidence of their love. Photographs of their children lined the mantel, and the worn furniture spoke of years of comfort and companionship. As she prepared for bed that night, Zelda caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her face showed the passage of time, lines around her eyes and mouth, threads of silver in her dark hair. But her eyes were bright and alive, filled with the satisfaction of a life well lived. She climbed into bed beside Benson, and he wrapped his arms around her like he had every night for more than 20 years. She listened to his breathing slow as he drifted towards sleep, and she felt the profound gratitude of someone who had found exactly where they belonged. The ranch was quiet in the darkness, but it was a peaceful quiet. The horses were settled, the cattle were safe, and her children were building their own lives with the foundation she and Benson had given them. Everything they had worked for, everything they had dreamed of, had come to pass. As Zelda finally let herself drift towards sleep, her last thought was of that dust devil on a hot August morning in 1872, and the sound of a horse crying out for help. She had followed that sound into a ravine, and it had led her to everything that mattered. It had led her to Benson, to partnership, to love, to a life beyond her wildest imaginings. And all because she could talk to horses and they listened back. All because a cowboy had looked at her gift and said, "I have never seen that before," with wonder instead of disbelief. Sometimes, Zelda thought as sleep finally claimed her, the most extraordinary things begin with the simplest acts of kindness. You save a horse, and in doing so, you save yourself. You take a chance on a stranger, and you find your soulmate. You embrace your differences, and you discover they are actually your greatest strengths. The ranch at Hangtown continued to thrive for many years after that night. James and Sarah carried on their parents' work, training horses with the same combination of skill and gift that had made the Whitaker name famous throughout California. Daniel managed the business side with increasing success, eventually expanding their operation to include breeding programs and training facilities. And when James's own children began to show signs of the gift, Zelda would take them aside and teach them what she had learned. That being different was not something to fear. That gifts were meant to be used, not hidden. That horses had their own wisdom to share if only humans would listen. She told them about the buckskin stallion and the cowboy who had helped her save him. She told them about taking risks and trusting your instincts and believing in the possibility of something extraordinary. And she told them about love, real and lasting love, that was built on respect and partnership and seeing each other truly. Benson and Zelda lived to see their grandchildren grow and their great-grandchildren born. They lived to see the ranch become one of the most successful in all of California, known not just for quality horses, but for the humane and effective training methods that had always set them apart. And through it all, they held unto each other, On cold winter nights and scorching summer days, through droughts and floods and all the challenges that came with ranching life, through the joys of watching their family grow and the sorrows of inevitable losses. They held on to each other because they had learned that day in the ravine that the most important thing in life was not going it alone. When Benson finally passed away in 1912, at the age of 66, Zelda held his hand and told him that she loved him. That she had loved him from the moment he had stood up in that saloon and offered to help a stranger save a horse. That every day with him had been a gift. "We did good," Benson whispered with his last breath. "Did not we? We did better than good," Zelda said through her tears. "We did extraordinary." She buried him on the hill next to the buckskin stallion, under the oak tree where they used to sit and watch the sunset. And every day for the rest of her life, she would visit that hill and tell him about the ranch, about their children and grandchildren, about the horses they were training. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, she would swear she could hear his voice on the wind. "I love you, Zelda Kincaid Whitaker. Now and forever." And she would whisper back, "I love you too. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for everything." Zelda lived another 15 years after Benson's death, surrounded by family and horses and the land they had built their life on. She watched her grandchildren have children of their own, saw the gift passed down through yet another generation. The Whitaker Ranch became legendary, and people came from all over the country to buy horses trained by the family that could somehow reach animals in ways no one else could. When Zelda finally passed in 1927, at the age of 77, she was buried beside Benson on that hill overlooking the ranch. Her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to say goodbye, and they told stories of her gift, of her courage, of the love she had shared with their grandfather. And in the corrals below, the horses that carried the bloodline of that original buckskin stallion lifted their heads and called out, a chorus of voices saying goodbye to the woman who had understood them like no other. The Whitaker Ranch continued for generations after that, and the story of Zelda and Benson became part of family legend. The young woman who could talk to horses and the cowboy who believed her. The partnership that became a love story. The gift that changed everything. And somewhere in whatever comes after, Zelda and Benson walked together through fields of golden grass, their hands clasped tight, surrounded by horses both wild and tame. They had found each other against impossible odds, built something lasting and true, and loved each other with everything they had. It was, in the end, exactly the life they were meant to live. Extraordinary, beautiful, and born from a single act of compassion on a hot August morning when a woman heard a horse cry out for help, and a cowboy said, "I will help." And so they did, together. As partners and lovers and friends, they helped that horse and countless others. And in doing so, they built a legacy that would echo through generations. A legacy of compassion and understanding, of seeing beyond the surface to the truth beneath, of believing in gifts that others might call impossible. Their love story began with a trapped horse and a skeptical cowboy who had never seen anything like Zelda's gift before. But it grew into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. It grew into a family, a ranch, a legacy, and a love that proved stronger than any obstacle. In the end, that is all any of us can hope for. To find someone who sees us truly. To build something meaningful together. To love and be loved in return. To leave the world a little better than we found it. Zelda and Benson Whitaker did all of that and more. And their story, born in a ravine where a wild horse was trapped and a gifted woman heard his cries, became the foundation for generations of love, partnership, and the magical connection between humans and horses. It was a story that began with 5 simple words. I have never seen that before. Words spoken in wonder rather than disbelief, in acceptance rather than rejection, in possibility rather than doubt. And it was a story that proved, once and for all, that the most extraordinary things in life often start with the simplest choice. The choice to help, the choice to believe, the choice to love. That choice, made on a dusty California morning in 1872, echoed through the decades that followed, touching countless lives and creating a legacy that would never be forgotten. Because Zelda talked to horses and they listened back, and because a cowboy named Benson Whitaker saw that gift and recognized it for what it truly was. Something miraculous, something beautiful, something worth building a life around. And so they did. Together, always together, they built something that lasted far beyond their own lives. Something that proved love and partnership and understanding could overcome any obstacle. Something that showed the world that being different was not a weakness but a strength. Their story ended, as all stories must, with death and goodbye. But it also ended with legacy and love and the knowledge that they had lived fully, loved completely, and created something lasting. On that hill overlooking the ranch, 3 graves stood side by side: Benson, Zelda, and the buckskin stallion who had brought them together. And every evening, as the sun set over the California landscape, their descendants would look up at that hill and remember. Remember the love story that started with a trapped horse. Remember the gift that made it all possible. Remember the partnership that proved stronger than any hardship. Remember the family that grew from that one moment of compassion, and in remembering, they kept the story alive. Passed it down to their own children, who would pass it down to theirs. The story of she who talked to horses and they listened back, and the cowboy who said, I have never seen that before, with wonder in his voice. It was a story of the Wild West, of hard work and harder times, of building something from nothing. But more than that, it was a love story, pure and simple and true. A love story that proved the best things in life come not from seeking them out, but from being open to them when they appear. And it all started with the sound of a horse in distress, a woman who could understand him, and a man willing to help them both. 3 lives brought together by fate and choice, and the simple act of choosing compassion over indifference. That was the legacy of Zelda Kincaid Whitaker and Benson Whitaker. Not just the ranch or the horses or the reputation they built, but the proof that love, real and lasting love, could be found in the most unexpected places. In a saloon in a dusty mining town. In a ravine where a wild horse was trapped. In the meeting of 2 souls who saw each other truly and chose every day to build something beautiful together. And so the story ended as all good stories do, with love triumphant, with legacy secured, with a life well lived and a love well earned. Zelda and Benson had found each other, loved each other, built a life together that exceeded their wildest dreams. They had taken a gift that could have isolated Zelda and turned it into the foundation of a family empire. They had taken a moment of crisis, a horse trapped in a ravine, and transformed it into a lifetime of partnership. That was their story. That was their legacy. And that was how it ended, not with sadness but with satisfaction, not with regret but with gratitude. Not with an ending but with continuation, as their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried forward the lessons they had taught and the love they had shared. The ranch still stood, decades after they were gone. The horses still carried their bloodline. And the story, their story, lived on in every retelling. A reminder that magic exists in the world if only we are brave enough to believe in it. That love exists if only we are brave enough to reach for it. And that sometimes The most extraordinary life begins with the simplest act of kindness, helping a creature in need. That was how she talked to horses and they listened back, and how the cowboy said, "I have never seen that before." That was how it all began, and how it all unfolded, and how it reached its beautiful, satisfying conclusion. It was, from beginning to end, a story worth telling, a love worth celebrating, a life worth living. And in the golden hills of California, on a ranch that bore their name, their memory lived on forever, as lasting as the land itself, as strong as the horses they had loved, as true as the love they had shared.